And I'm guessing that, especially with your case, where there's not that many employees, it's not just you that's a salesperson; it's the rest of the workforce that actually helps stuff.
Yeah, in fact, like probably I'm like the one who's least credible, right? It's like they should be talking to the other people who made the leap that I'm asking them to make, and make sure that they're not like, don't do it, you know.
Well, Beth, you had an interesting comment talking about bringing the people along with you. I think a lot of people think that in a large organization that it's mandated from the top. This is our culture, this is our vision, these are our values. And you recognize there's a delicate balance with actually tapping into people's individual motivation. How do you balance that, saying that, yes, Comcast, they want a culture, they've got a vision, but how do we bring the organization along so that they feel it's part of the journey?
Yeah, that's been an interesting exercise for us over the years, and there's been stumbles along the way, admittedly. One of the things that we talked about as we were preparing for this was the fact that you can create a culture, or a culture can be created without you even realizing it's happening.
Right.
And so as we've looked at this, we went through a period of time where we were going through the shift, and there was an assumption made that everybody was just going to get it, and they were just going to come along.
Yeah.
And you have to be very strategic. What is it that we want? Who are we trying to be as a company? What is that culture? And then you have to listen. You really have to listen to the employees and understand, do we have it right? It shouldn't be, the top leader sitting in a room with the door closed and saying, this is, by the way, going to be what our culture is now. Get on board. Mm-hmm. You have to listen and understand, what do I want? What are the employees telling me that we want? How do we put that together and really understand? It's so much easier then to create a culture. And I talk a lot about sparking the fire and fanning the flame. Because if you can get something that resonates with the employees that you want to keep, and then you put it out there, they'll take a hold of it and they'll run with it, and it grows on its own. So that's been something that we've had to be very careful about, is to really be paying attention to that and understand how you can get that energy and momentum around it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's interesting because you bring the point as we talk about, do you have an accidental culture or do you have an intentional culture? And there are certain things you can do to shape the culture. But every culture means something different to everybody. Mike, tell us, in your company, what does culture mean to you, and what are some of the key things you're doing to try to shape it?
Okay. So to me, culture in our company is I would describe as a way of life at the workplace, where you're spending such a significant amount of your time. If you're not enjoying it or getting a lot out of it, it's going to be painful, the way I look at it. And to me, really, I can't imagine that being a good move for people. And there's a lot of people that are in our field, and maybe that they don't belong in our field. They're not the people we're talking about. They're ultra talented. There are people that would be ultra talented in another field.
Yeah.
Those things are more difficult. But the key thing to me has been what Beth mentioned, which is listening. I think for us it started as an accidental. You mentioned this. I think it was accidental. We started this business 13 years ago with 10 people that were all technologists, and basically the only thing I did that was valuable and right that I'm proud of is listen to them, saying, here's what my understanding of what this business should look like from my mentors was this. And it looks like a regular service business. You're billing 90% of the time, 10% of the times you're paid time off. But for these people, they need to learn all the time. So asking them, how can we satisfy this? How can we make this work? Mm-hmm. One way is to take, and this was their idea, to take an additional 10% and invest it in professional development for our employees, which means we only strive for 80% utilization. And in doing that, what it does for the employees.
That's a big hit for consulting firms, quite honestly, because I've come up through traditional consulting, and to actually give that much up, to say we're going to dedicate 10% off the top to that's significant. That sends a message.
When I went back to my mentors, who are very seasoned business people, and said that, they laughed at me and said, well, how are you going to make a profit? That all sounds great, but how can you make a profit? Well, we had a way we could make a profit, and as a team, and we had experienced this prior with these people, the people that are the best in software development. If you say they're worth 3 times, this other, you could look at 2 people's resumes next to each other, and one could be worth 3 times the other. To regular people that aren't technologists, they think you're crazy. To someone who's, a lot of the people who are at this conference, they look at it and they understand it. That could be true, because what they produce does what it's supposed to do. There's all the difference in the world of these people. Yeah. To me, listening to them, what drives them, what motivates them, well, part of it is this constant learning. and having the people they can learn from each other. So things like ETE, this conference, we have so many people come here to learn so much in 2 days. We do Chariot Days, internal conferences. I know Comcast does them also, which I really respect. For a really big company to do this, it's hard to listen to thousands, 100,000 plus people. It's hard to listen to. For me, I can get 60 people in a room. I can get opinions, and we can do that, and then mold it from them. And in the beginning, it was accidental. I listened to them. We came up with a plan. We all said, we'll do this. We'll prove it out. We'll prove we can be successful with half the team size. And I just had to have faith in them and listen to them. And all throughout, we've learned the things that work. And then to get feedback, again, has showed us where we need to focus. So we have changed other areas to overcome those challenges.
Rick, how about you? What does culture mean in your organization, and what are some things you try to shape it with?
I think there's the way, you know, like Mike was saying, the way it feels when you're at work, and I think that's kind of like, that would kind of, to me, define culture as like the aggregate personality of the company. Like, you have a personality, and I can probably figure that out after we hang out a few times.
Right. Well,
culture in startups begins with the founders, simply because they're the first ones there. So their personalities sort of begin the culture, and then you start growing, and sort of this aggregate personality forms, and that becomes kind of the behavioral part of your culture. That's how I would sort of categorize kind of like when you're not doing a task, when you're not doing work, you know, there's kind of that aspect of how it feels to be at work. And then and on the actual like professional execution side, how do you sort of create the right temperament or attitude or behavior? And there's a couple things that I'll try to offer up that are intentionally, I guess, maybe, or I'm trying to make them be non-obvious, or trying to make them be maybe opposite of convention or whatever, just to maybe stimulate some thoughts with everyone. But you know, the first one, and this would be, I guess, the least controversial one, is kind of the tortoise and hare analogy, and I'm a big believer in the tortoise mentality, and I think that when you think about a startup, and especially when you're starting and you're finding product market fit, but then after you find product market fit and you're trying to shape your go-to-market and how you're going to sell it and market it, and then when you get some initial scale, how you're going to get to the, you know, from maybe 1 million in recurring revenue to 10, you know, it can be super dangerous, I think, with a hare mentality to be like, okay, well, everyone's going to rally around and we're going to all push out this release. We're going to work ridiculous hours, and then the release hits, right? And that release never did the thing that you wanted. It just never does, because I think there's just it's really you never hang your hat on just sort of one thing, and it's always, you know, when you look back at any successful product launch or growth of a company, it's always hard to point at one or two things, and it's always more, I feel like, a philosophy or a mentality of sort of like mountain climbing and progressing up the mountain each step at a time. And so I think that's where the hare mentality comes in, because we're predisposed working in startups to have the hare mentality, right? Because there's urgency. There's probably a fume date if you've raised some money. So you already are like, well, okay, paychecks stop coming at this date, right? So there's urgency there. And your team knows that too. They're not dummies.
Okay. Beth, what about you? What is culture at Comcast, and what do you try to do to help shape that?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because I'm with both of you on this. I was doing another presentation recently, and I decided to tool around on the internet a little bit and see how people were defining culture, because it's the latest buzzword. I mean, it's what everybody uses right now, and you can come up with page-long definitions of what culture is. But the bottom line, I was talking to someone about it, and the bottom line is, it's how do we do things around here? And that can be anything from teamwork to ethics to, you know, as you said, the environment. Is it fun? You know, are we designing technology for technology's sake? Are we designing it to solve a business problem? But it's just, how do we do things around here? So, you know, I've interviewed a lot over the years, and your fellow interviewers will say, well, they don't fit the culture. And if you don't, what do you mean by that? That can be such a cop-out word. But if you really understand it, that's what it really comes down to. Well, they do things differently. They think differently than we think around here. So, you know, we look for problem solvers. We look for collaborators. We look for logical thinkers. We look for people with energy and passion around things. We look for very ethical people. Those are all elements of our culture as we define it. But
So
it's not a magic bullet.
Right.
You know, there's no
Right.
little black box sitting somewhere that's locked away that says this is what our culture is.
Interesting. Just kind of a show of hands. How many folks out there, your company, you think, does a good job of actively trying to manage culture? Okay. Good. Quite a good show of hands. So let me just kind of pause right here and open it for questions for a little bit. We'll come back to the panel discussion. What questions might you have so far that you'd like to pose to the panel? Anybody have anything? Yes.
Yeah. There's a saying that Clifford Geertz, anthropologist, says, culture is the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves. And so I know one of the ways to help create culture is to shape the stories that get told in your organization about your organization. And so I'm just wondering, in what ways are you doing that, and what have you found to be the most effective stories? I mean, I heard your tortoise and hare analogy, and I'm just wondering what else you're doing in that way.
It's a good question. Yeah, I think the first thing I would say about that is I agree. First of all, it is the stories you tell yourself about yourself. But those stories have to be true and genuine, because you can tell yourself stories, and if they disconnect with what really is happening, that doesn't work. And we've done that over the years, not deliberately, but there's times, we would go out and say, oh, we're a family-oriented company, and we knew that meant, we are a family and we are supporting each other, and it gets misinterpreted in the marketplace. It gets all jumbled. People are like, oh, does that mean that you get off, every day at noon to go home with your kid? No, you're disconnecting with what it is that you're really all about. And we did not do a good job for a long time of telling our story. It was by design. Our founder, to your point from earlier, who was an amazing person, taught us for years, put your nose to the grindstone, do your work. Don't talk to the press. You just work hard and you will be rewarded for it. And that worked really, really well for us for a long time. But then when you get to be as big as we are now, somebody's got to communicate that message. Somebody has to get those stories out there, because you can't get it through to 135,000 employees unless somebody is talking very pointedly about it. So we now do a lot of internal speaking engagements. We do a lot of video that we can get out more broadly in the organization, where you are showcasing elements. We do a lot of internal recognition, where we are rewarding and recognizing individuals that are embodying the culture.
We need a lot of people. We've always needed people in the last 13 years, but we need a lot more people now. And so we don't do the best job of telling our story to recruits, to the other people out there. Here we are, we can finish #1 in the Philadelphia area in top workplaces. And we need so many people, and we still have a hard time getting those people. So we talked about, and as part of it is sharing internally, where we do this, like we do Chariot days, and everybody comes in and nobody works that day. That their work is presenting to each other, attending presentations, telling their stories about things that have happened. In addition to that, very recently we said, well, we needed like a Life at Chariot page, something on our site where other people could see. We do so many things together. We're a consulting firm. We're all at different client sites, but so we do a lot of events together, all kinds of crazy things. Some things I wouldn't necessarily put up there, like a poker game or something. Maybe someone would take it the wrong way. But we do it. We do lots of things. You name it. We do it. So I think that telling that story is really important, and we have decided as a group we need to get that out there so other people can see how great it is where we are.
Another question, yeah.
At a company as big as, say, Comcast, where you have hundreds of thousands of people, do you find it important to aim for a unified culture, or do you have to look at each department and adjust it slightly for each one?
It's a really, really good question. Kind of two levels of answers there. First of all, the punchline is the latter. So you have to allow for some individualization in cultures around the company. I mean, I have film studios and amusement parks and the largest network in the nation. And, we just have so many different types of businesses, and it doesn't make sense to say they all have to be cookie cutter cultures. But the other thing that we had to kind of get past, and we're still in the middle of it, is the bifurcation in the culture that's happened with us. Because for a long time, we were raised on the idea of fair means the same. I mean, one of the things that I love about working for this company is how ethical and fair they are, and the leaders are. And for a long time, that meant, your benefits, your perks, your environments, they should be the same, because the entry-level employee and the leaders, they are equal, and they should get the same thing. So fair meant the same. And now, if you move into the space of, I have, 75-80% of my employees are frontline customer-facing folks, but now I have this group of technologists out there. Well, fair is not necessarily the same anymore, because they don't want the same things. So now fair has to become different, and that was a real shift for us, which goes back to the listening that we talked about before. And we have to, we do a lot of work around saying, okay, there is an underlying culture. There is something that cuts across all of these organizations, and we've peeled away the layers of that onion. And I have a one-pager that says, no matter where you go in this organization, this is what success looks like. But then there's so many layers on top of that, depending on, are you working for Fandango? Are you working in field operations in, Atlanta, Georgia, that need to be there in order for people to be successful, and that's okay.
Just to add a quick point to that. In my experience with Dell, and I think with acquisitions in general, you used to see acquisitions happen, and the acquired company would be integrated into the mothership, and sales team would report to the sales team of the acquired company, engineering, marketing, etc. And that essentially doesn't really work. Industry-wide statement. There's exceptions always to macro things like that, but when you look at acquisitions now, and you just look at the post-mortem after the acquisition happened, many of those companies that were acquired run as their own business units. A Salesforce.com company, Dell Boomi, Instagram, and you see those companies running. And there, I think there's, and at Dell, we were one of the 12 companies that were acquired. We were acquired in 2010. Between 2009 and 2012, they acquired 12 companies. And so we saw Dell get really good as a machine at the process of acquiring. And one of the top reasons, however many they are, that integration doesn't work is culture. Because when you take a sales team that's used to pick any department and they're used to operating a certain way, and you mash them into this other machine that's built to run a little bit of a different way, the personalities might not work well together. And it just example after example of that just sort of not working. And so culture, I think that's a great example of this, going back to your question, this idea of like big company but still preserving the sort of pockets of autonomy from a cultural perspective.
So let's kind of go through and talk about, everybody here has been on a culture journey. What are some of the surprises that you've encountered on your culture journey? Things that might be counterintuitive that would help folks along in their journey?
I'm not sure if this will help folks along or not. I had to think about that. But the one real surprise I've had a lot of surprises in this. All the businesses that I had prior to Chariot were about me, and I was the leader, and I knew all this stuff. Here, I'm the least smart person in my company. I'm a listener. My job is to treat people like the gods that they are in my eyes. And I love it. I mean, most of my job is that, and we do have those people. And culture I've learned everything here's been learned from other people about this culture and what it takes and what they need to make them happy. And the most important thing to them has been this commitment to only hiring. We say we're only going to hire this type of person that fits. We interview 35 people for every one that we hire, but probably 1 out of 10 or 15 fit the technical. It's very stringent technical requirements, but still a lot of them do meet that. We still don't hire them. And the reason is, when I look at the write-ups, the most important thing of all is, would you like to work with this person? Would you want to work with this person? Because if you wouldn't, well, yes, we'll ask why. We want to understand that. But why is it? A lot of people, there's a reason, and it wouldn't fit, and it wouldn't fit in the team, But the real surprise I had is the power you get when you do have a great culture and people are together like a family. When what hits the fan, in late 2009, early 2010, and we've been very lucky. Other than when we first started, we didn't really have a real major problem till then. Yeah. We had a problem then, and we had about 40 people, I'd say then. But when 40 people understand the problem and have the opportunity to help it, it's incredible. And what happened, it showed me a ton. showed me that all this stuff that we're doing, where it may look on the surface like we're sacrificing profit for happiness, and I feel like we were sacrificing profit, and I would do it in a heartbeat, but I think in the end, you can have it all. Because if you have really happy people and they're consistent, we have a staff, we have very low turnover, you can have them, you can solve the world's problems, you can make a difference at big companies everywhere and have fun doing it and make good money too at the same time. So that's been a big surprise to me, is to understand what people could do as a group. It's not a management team or 3 or 4 people, it's the whole company.
Yeah, the surprise of culture and what a synergistic effect that has on everything. Excellent. Beth, how about you?
2 things I would say that fit together. The first one is, it surprised me how many people think of culture as an HR issue or initiative. Yeah. You know, like, I don't have to solve for culture, HR does that. And which drives me crazy. And I can say that because I was an HR person for a long time. Because culture's got to come from everybody. And if you look at the companies that have the strongest cultures, I mean, and that strong culture can create independence and confidence across the organization, but it's got to come from everybody. And I guess tied into that, the second thing that I've watched people do that hasn't worked as well is how many people try to turn culture into a program or process.
Right. Yeah.
And so, you know, one, that can make it extremely intimidating to try to mold a culture, because they're like, oh, you know, I got to spend the next 3 days, you know, on the culture. I mean, one of the things that I end up doing all the time, I refer to them as my Jane meet Joe moments, which is literally just introduce 2 people within the organization that you think, you know, one of them's a culture carrier and somebody else may need some help, and just say, hey, why don't the 3 of us get together for coffee? And then they just go off and do it. That's simple. But I guess because it is the latest buzzword, everybody tries to turn it into this big, onerous program. Right. And it doesn't need to do that.
Absolutely. In fact, yeah, I've years ago, the culture things come and go in cycles in management. About 15 years ago, culture was very big too. And people, you had these culture programs that you would be launching, these culture programs, a lot of consulting firms, change your culture. And unless you tie it to some kind of a business purpose, and unless you tie it to day-to-day how you talk to people, is, you know, this program thing that people have as a programmatic thing doesn't really work that well. What do you have to say about that?
I think probably the biggest surprise, we probably at Boomi in our early days, we went through a pivot, to use a lated, you know, startup buzzword, but it was probably even more dramatic than that. So we had a lot of dark days and kind of figuring it out before we sort of found product market fit and got good growth. And you know, it's obvious. I think it's a kind of an overused thing to say you need to create a culture of transparency. But if that's not obvious, then you need to create a culture of transparency. But so that's the easy part. I think the surprising part was, you know, it's easy to be transparent when things are going great, right?
Yeah.
You know, okay, let me tell you everything that's going on because it's all good news. Well, it's a lot harder to be transparent when things aren't going well. And I think the biggest surprise to me was the taking the risk of being transparent and sharing bad news and talking about, you know, whatever bad thing might have been going on in those early days, and how the team, the net positive impact that has on the company and the team, and the energy, the rally kind of mentality and sentiment that happens after you shared that bad news. Because, you know, you're sort of jumping off a cliff a little bit because you're standing up there, whatever, maybe we were 10 or 11 people at the time sharing something bad and wondering like, oh God, everyone's going to be updating their resumes, and, you know, and no one did. In fact, it was the opposite. It was like everybody was like sort of, well, let's roll up our sleeves. And so I think that was a pretty, that sort of, I think, hooked me on the importance of transparency in good times and bad.
Oh, interesting. So let's talk about some of the specific things that are characteristics. So let's talk about, for each of you, 2 characteristics that you use to describe your culture and something that you've done to get it there. Anyone can start.
Rick, how about you start?
Sure.
I guess we're trying to think.
Well, I did the tortoise and the heron already, but I think.
So you got credit for one. Okay, let's get another one.
I got one. I think the other one is I've never so for those of you that know me, like I know nothing about sports, but I try to use sports analogies and I'm really bad at them. But anyway, this one is probably easy enough that I can do it. I haven't found a better way to describe it, but it's sort of the athlete mentality, which is where you find someone who you think has a natural ability and adaptability and aptitude, and you put them in roles that maybe they've never done before. And that's probably, to simplify things, that's one extreme. The other extreme would be, I need to hire a VP of marketing, and I'm working at a software as a service company. So I'm going to go find a VP of marketing at a software as a service company, ideally that's sold in my same industry. Now, that's hard to do. It's hard to do in any city. It's hard to do in Philadelphia. It's hard to do in wherever you are. So we did a lot of the athlete stuff at Boomi, and so I would call that the athlete strategy, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
But it was all about finding people that one, were a cultural fit. We routinely would dismiss people at Boomi and at Guru because they might be rock star, skill set, capability, background, but not going to be a cultural fit, so we wouldn't do it.
How tough was that the first 2 times to do in a small company? Is that difficult, or is it just kind of second nature to you?
No, nothing's definitely not second nature. I think it's sort of like, it goes back to that personality thing, right? Like it's like, well, and I think it's also because I'm sure I didn't do that over the years at Boomi, and it came back to bite me, right? So I was like, well, okay, I made that mistake. Let's only make new mistakes. So
No whiteboard, right?
yeah, exactly. So we realized the productivity black hole that forms around that asshole that you hired, that was super qualified and talented, but is bullying their team, and just really dragging things down, and the net negative impact that happens when you do that. So we sort of got better at that, but so we do this athlete thing, and we would hire people and put them in roles they had never been in. We'd also promote from within people who were just killing it, took initiative in individual performer roles, and give them more responsibility. Sometimes it didn't work, but usually it did. When I look at our best leaders, sort of categorically, a lot of them were, right out of college, or one of them was even an intern, and they just sort of moved up and got more and more responsibility, and they were always being put in roles they had never done before. But again, it's sort of this athlete thing of, let's sort of take a chance on that person because they express the personality of this company, and they're also really, really good as an individual performer, and more specifically than they're good as an individual performer, they're taking initiative. Right, they're taking the ball. So you put this problem out there, and what's your tendency? Your tendency is, boy, I hope someone solves that, or you go, I'm going to solve that. And so when you see an individual performer do that, take a chance on them, because they'll probably hire people who behave that way too, right? And that's a tremendous benefit when you get more people like that, because again, early stage startup, everyone's wearing a lot of hats, a lot of autonomy, and all that. So I think the athlete one was a big one for us. Oh,
excellent. Beth, how about you? Characteristic or two of Comcast that is culture, and how you specifically try to shape the culture in that direction.
Yeah, so I was thinking very quickly as you were. I would say 2 things. One, that probably maybe a little bit further along in where we are in shaping things. And then the second one is, my focus now. One is, I think I mentioned before, we're a very collaborative company. It's a very matrixed reporting structure. You need to work with people across the company in order to get things done. And when my job was created, one of the reasons it was created is because we had brought in NBC Universal. They continue to operate as a separate company, but there are moments that it makes sense for them to collaborate. So my role is to ferret out those moments and figure that out. So when we think about collaboration, some of the things that we've done in that space through my group, and there's so many things happening within the organization, some within my group, some outside, are things we talked a little bit earlier about Lab Week, for example.
Right. Let's talk about Lab Week. That's an interesting concept. Yeah. And that can be a big culture shaper, I think. Yeah,
we have a couple things going on right now. So Lab Week started within one of our groups, our technology and products group, and it's an opportunity for any employee that wants to come. And, it started drawing mainly technology employees, but it is open to everyone to come in and pitch out an idea that they have, something that they want to work on for that week. And they pitch it out to other employees, And those individuals can sign on for whatever project looks interesting to them. And so they spend that week working on their project teams. At the end of the week, there's a science fair for them to have an opportunity to present out what they've worked on. Some of those projects are picked up as things that we do within the workplace. Some of them, aren't. It just depends on where they've gotten with them. And they now range everywhere from people pitching out ideas for new products to people pitching out how do we get better at branding ourselves on college campuses, to how do you deal with that on a 56th floor building? Is there a way that we could put a sensor in the elevator that says when that elevator is full, so you don't have that embarrassing moment when the elevator doors open up and you're looking at the three people that are standing there that can't get in the elevator? And there was a lot of people that jumped for that project team. But we do this a couple times a year, and it's something that started within one group, and now we're starting to try to lift it into other parts of the company because it creates moments for collaboration. And if you start to bring in other parts of the company, you're showing that that is valued. And you're giving people time to do that. One of the other things we did in that space is I hosted in December. I mean, one of the things I think that, again, is an industry-wide issue is we had a lot of females working in the technology space that were saying, I'm the only one. And so we gathered 100 women from across our company, from LA to New York to London to wherever, and we brought them all into Philadelphia. And at the end of 2 days after having a conference, I said to them, I could have walked into this room, said to you, hi, my name is Beth, I will be your host. I'm going to go now and go do my job for 2 days. I'm just going to close this door, let me know when you're done, because all we had to do was bring them together and they'll collaborate. So I think there's things going on in that space that we're starting to do a much better job of showing people that collaboration is very much a part of our culture and creating opportunities for them to do that. The second thing is, we hire people that really want to contribute. And they want to contribute not only to the organization, but they want to contribute to the external community. So we're doing a lot this year to try to understand how do you harness that energy. They're doing it on their own. They're volunteering. They're, they're big brothers and big sisters. They're out there being mentors to US First in the technology space. They're doing all of these different, they're working, with tech girls. And, how do you, one, create moments for them to find those opportunities more easily, and two, show that that is something that is also valued by the company, that we want to help them fulfill their need to contribute back, not only to the organization, but also outside the organization.
Yeah, good examples. Right?
Okay. It's interesting because we have we're a company full of these high-end, world-class technologists, but when I think of two things or characteristics to describe us, I would say the first is family, because I think that's what it feels like. And the second would be really the pride and determination of the employees, of the people there. And I think that from a company perspective, for me personally, I need to give them what they need. They have the ability to thrive, but I have to listen to them, understand what they want, and we as a group have to put them in position to do that. And a lot of it for our people, this pride and determination, they need to move the needle. They have to make a difference. So even if we're at a company as we are, as big as Comcast, we have to be able to say, these are things we did that changed the business for Comcast, gave them other things. There's so much pride and enjoyment they get out of that feedback, out of seeing what they did, because you don't always get that. So for us to understand those things, and the family there's a lot of love between our people. I mean, we go out and we do all these different things and events, and together we choose to do together. I see that. I see what people choose to do together. Even not official company events. That someone in there says, here, we're going to go do this, and they send it out, and the attendance, and seeing how close everybody is with each other, that's really been the key to our place, and not allowing anything to change that. Not allowing the business demands or the want or desire to grow or to make so much money or any of these things to get in the way of what we're all about. So I think as a team, we've done a great job. If I had to do it on my own, it would be tough, really tough. But as a team and with everyone's support, we've been able to pull that off.
Oh, great. Actually, kind of on the whole topic of characteristics, I'll ask a specific question for Rick, because you've got kind of experience in both these realms. We talked about probably things that are common characteristics between companies that you're really kind of heading up. So it's the kind of the tortoise and the hare, the athlete kind of way to go in. Did you find any differences in culture for when you're starting up Guru right now with just a handful of people versus in your later years at Boomi when it was about to get sold to Dell? Are there kind of differences in those?
I think, I think for one thing, it's the part that's really hard is the viability thing I was saying earlier. So that's probably the hard thing now. Is making candidates comfortable, and when they join the team, comfortable that they've joined something that has longevity. I try to condition everyone around the fact that most startups are on a 7 to 10 year journey. If you look statistically back at startups that grew, it's a 7 to 10 year journey, and who knows how long it is, but at least that promotes that feeling of endurance. Like the worst thing to do would be, hey, that cool startup you read about in TechCrunch that launched and 6 months later got acquired. like that doesn't happen. That's like the lottery ticket. So don't tell people that's like what's going to happen. So the 7 to 10 year thing on that thing. But I think the simpler part when you're small, and I guess maybe the benefit of starting Boomi, being 3 co-founders, and then growing it up, and the Dell Boomi team, I think now something like 150 or so people. And then going back to Guru, we just hired our 9th person. Is just it's really easy to do a lot of the things that we're talking about. Like I was listening to you going like, boy, I don't envy the complexity of the problem you have to think about, because man, I only have to think about 9 people, and I kind of suck at that. Like I could 30,000. But you can, the thing about transparency, and the thing about doing things outside of the office, and the thing about creating that observing the personality that's emerging, and promoting the parts about it that are healthy for the company, is just really easy to do. I think when it's 9 people, and I think it's easy to do, and therefore I strongly encourage that we all do it. Because it only gets harder. Yeah. And I think we were having our chat here before the panel, and we were all talking about different dimensions of quality versus quantity. Right. And anything biological or human behavior or whatever. It all begins at a core of something, right? That's like that starts with a really small thing and then grows. Well, the better you mold that really small thing, the way better off you're going to be when it becomes a really big thing, because you've sort of gotten the right, whether you want to call it that aggregate personality or whatever, or execution tendencies kind of naturally occurring, because like Beth was saying, like if you flash up a culture slide during a town hall, like you've already lost. So we know that, right? So it's like trying to tell people you're cool, right? You're saying you're not. Right. So it's the same thing. So I think when it's small, you have a great opportunity to shape it. It's easier to do it. So no excuses not to, and then it pays dividends when you get bigger.
Makes it easier when you get larger. Yeah.
Totally.
Let's open up for a couple questions. Thoughts? Yes.
How do you convince, so I'm obviously not a president of the company or the founder of a startup. So how do you convince senior management to do all these wonderful things that you're talking about?
Their teams will perform better, right? I think their teams will perform better. And unfortunately, I can't give you traditional business metrics to prove that to you. So you have to take a leap from that perspective. But I think the good news is I would be willing to bet that after a few of these innovation projects, they kind of sound a little bit like hackathons, internal hackathons. I'd be willing to bet after a few of those, the word got around, and teams were looking at each other going, wow, that thing was really cool. So I think you can't measure it with traditional business metrics, but I think a couple of things, even at a big company, that's a very tactical, specific thing you guys were able to go and do that had a positive outcome. I think a couple of cycles of doing that, you can look back and go, see, like the team's working better together. There's better collaboration going on. There's better communication going on. You can observe those things.
Yeah, and I would say, I talk a lot about start small, think big, because I would say the exact same thing. I mean, you guys are saying, 135,000 employees. I never go into an initiative saying, okay, now I'm going to solve for this for 135,000 employees. Like, I'll go in saying, okay, I need to to change something. At one point we needed to change the way that executive leaders got feedback within our organization. At some point they said, okay, senior leaders, they're fully baked, so they don't need feedback anymore. And the senior leaders were going, I'm sorry, we've been changing left and right here, and I'm not sure what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But you start with, okay, you know what? Can I get these five leaders? Can we play around with this a little bit and see, how does it feel? How does it feel on you? And then you know what? They go, you know what? That actually changed the conversation. We did a 360 on them, like a really in-depth, that changed the way that we talked to each other. That was pretty valuable. And you said earlier, Tom, it's got to be tied to a business issue. So if you can tie it, if you can say to a business leader, like, hey, let me do this for you because I'm solving for a business issue.
Yeah.
Let me have, I'm trying to think of another example, and if nothing's coming to my mind right now. Let me, this core technology program that I run, and I have 3 of my associates here in the room. Let me hire, to your point, quality versus quantity, 3 guys in my inaugural class that I'm going to move around the business because you know what, we need software engineers. Let me just hire a couple, see how this works. Okay, well now I have 20 and I'm hiring another 11 and they're moving all over but it started this big. But the end goal, the think big is, I need to solve for how do we get culture carriers that think more innovatively about how the business works, and they put all the pieces and all the different parts of the business together, and they think about this on an enterprise-wide basis, and I can break down the barriers of the different business that think they need the resume to read this way in order to come into their business, because now they see it's really more about the ability to solve problems and more about the ability to think logically and more about the ability to learn Ruby on Rails quickly than it is about walking in with that resume. But that's not the discussion point I start with. That's where I know I'm going. But I'm starting with, hey, would you mind if I hire 3 software engineers and see what we can do with them? So that's how I think about it.
Well, and Mike, for you, this is an interesting question because you too have, in your previous life, it's a different experience than you have with management now, being the top. So back to the question, which I think is a great question, is what do you do? Think back to your earlier days when you were more the technician guys, and now where you are now, what would you have said to the top leader then that might have gotten their attention?
Well, I certainly believe in the business benefits of it. So if our company had 0 turnover, and I work with the people I work for, I go to senior management, we have like no turnover, it's going to be a little more difficult to sell this thing, but that's not realistic. With companies that are heavily dependent on technology, the cost of losing people and not being able to get the people you want is tremendously high. So you have to, now you do in general, when you're pitching to senior management, you have to try to quantify some things. You have to come up with some metrics, which is sometimes a lot of BS, but you have to do your best to get there if you have to pitch it. But there are strong business arguments to this. You can easily, I actually do a lot of the things I do at Chariot for joy and for the happiness of people and all that. But when I talk to my board, I can, like stock, we give out stock to our employees. Our employees we're a company that should be owned by employees. But I pitch it as it's incentive compensation. It keeps there's a vesting schedule. That's not why I do it. But there's business benefits, and you have to articulate that. It's important to do that. And so in the long run, and some of them are long run. A lot of them may not favor the short run, but hopefully you can convince senior management of these business benefits.
Yeah, thanks. Other question? Yes.
So first of all, thank you, and I wanted to applaud you for not hanging on to highly performing assholes. I think that's it takes maturity in the companies. And the question I have is around how do you retain culture and talent as the companies go through periods of change, so specifically growth?
So a huge change for Boomi was when we got acquired by Dell. By far our biggest change. And we were acquired in 2010. Now it's 2015. And there are a category of people where that's unsolvable, right? There's a category of people that are like, I want to work for a small company, and I just do. And I can't go into this crazy system to set up a rec, and I can't follow this IT policy, and I can't, whatever the thing is. They just won't adapt to it. So that, and I guess I'm one of them because I have to. But there's a really significant population of people, of folks that are still there 5 years later. So I would say now their decision to leave has nothing to do with Boomi or Dell, and it's am I having a rewarding thing? And I think when I look back on it, all the credit goes to Dell. because they were very good acquirers. I always say that. And one of the things they did was recognize the existence of a culture and recognize that maybe they didn't understand it, but they knew that it was different from theirs. And so in light of that, let's treat that like eggshells and sort of walk around that and make sure that everybody feels good, make sure that everybody feels like they're part of the team and part of Dell, but make sure that they still feel like they're driving Boomi forward. And that feels a lot more concrete. That feels like something I can grab as someone who now works for this different company. Oh, wow, it's been a month after the acquisition. Okay, my job's still the same. I mean, I remember so many conversations of like, well, what's going to happen? I'm going to have this new job. I'm going to work for this new person. It's like, I don't think you will. I can't say that for sure you can, because I've never gone through this before, but I don't think you will. They seem to be saying that we're all going to be kind of doing the same stuff. And then like as time went by, that's what happened. I mean, it was very much recognition of the existence of this different thing and making sure that it could continue to flourish, I think.
And I would say a couple of things. First of all, you mentioned two things. So maintaining the culture and retaining the talent. One, don't get too militant about the culture. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm a big one on always asking why. I think you constantly have to be looking at the culture to make sure, is that still the right culture? And so that's one of the ways that you are going to retain it through this. You know, where am I in my growth as a company? Where am I in these points of change? And is this culture still where we should be? The other thing, you know, to me, part of retaining the right talent is hiring the talent that makes sense for you. And so for our organization, those are people that are really comfortable with change, that enjoy that. Those are the people that in the first year that I started up, you know, I run 3 different programs. In the first year that I started them up, I didn't have the full design of the program yet. And I'm out, you know, on campuses saying, you know, I'd like you to come work for me, versus, you know, going to work for any of these other big names. And I don't have all the answers. I don't know exactly what this program is, but what I can tell you is you're going to have a part in shaping it. And so you hire the people that go, oh, really? Going back to, I can contribute, I can have an impact. And rather than the people that are saying, wait, what's the rule book and what's going to happen and how is this going to work? Because those people are going to stick with you through those times of change, because that's actually energizing for them versus, now, I'm not going to tell you there's not nerves around it. There's definitely nerves around it. But they get a certain level of energy from that. So I think that that's part of the retention tactic.
So I'll be really quick with this one because Beth said a lot of the things. It's exactly what I would really say. I mean, for us, I would sum it up first as hiring discipline. It starts with that, having that discipline to only add the right people. You can really mess things up. They tell me my job is to not screw it up. Don't get in the way of things that are there that work really, really well. And then on the retention side, the other thing I also agree with very much is the involvement. You know, in our company, people are involved in strategic planning. They can't have 60 people in every meeting, but periodically we do strategic planning and people are involved in all these initiatives that come out of that. They support it as a team. Not everyone agrees, but we're all professionals. Yeah. And we support it. And the key thing for me is always being honest. Also, it's been mentioned a lot about being transparent, keeping my word no matter what. It's the most important thing to me. So when I look at things, and for our employees, we look at our goals and objectives, and they're very simple. For the brilliant people we have, you'd be surprised at how simple these things are. And there's only 6 or 7 on the list, and the only ones I even remember are the top 3. Because we agreed if we do the top 3 right, the rest of them will take care of themselves. And they're not about money, the top 3. They're about customer satisfaction, they're about employee happiness, and they're about the quality of our brand. So to me, it's the hiring, it is that hiring discipline, and then it's this how you treat them, the honesty, getting them involved in your path forward. They're much more likely to support you and to be happy.
Great. I think we're going to let that be the last word. We've got 10 seconds left. Nice close, Mike. Thank you. I'd like to thank our panelists. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Beth. Thank you, Rick.